Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are covering one of the absolute strongest builds in Baldur's Gate 3, the Lockadin. Before patch 8 launched, I already rated this as one of the most powerful characters in the game for Honor Mode, and with the launch of patch 8, it has received significant buffs to every single aspect of the character. Your damage has increased tremendously, your defensive capabilities have gotten much better, and your ability to provide control and utility to the party has also increased. And the one weakness of the build that it took a while to come online has completely vanished, making this pretty much one of the uncontested best builds in the entire game. And maybe the best build to solo Honor Mode with, at least amongst builds that actually enter combat. Obviously the best builds are stealth archery builds that never fight enemies, but amongst builds that actually fight enemies, this may be the single best solo build in the game. You're also pretty much the best character in the game at using illithid powers and get access to all of the most broken item combinations in the game, so put it all together, this character does pretty much everything, and does it better than characters that specialize in those roles, making it just an absurdly powerful character for Honor Mode. That's why we're going to update this video with the increased power for patch 8. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Darek for the $5 donation, Rob Agnew for the $15, Olympian for the $5, and Worm and John Watts for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means a lot. Alright, let's get building. I'm using Minthara as the example character here because, of course, this is a Paladin build, and she's the Paladin of the party, though I think it's also very on flavor for Wyll as well, if you want to lean into his aspect as the Blade of Frontiers more, as a more justice-focused Paladin, then this is a very flavorful build for him as well. Minthara has some special synergies with this build, though. As a drow, her additional cast of Darkness once per day is extremely useful for a Darkness-focused character, and her head start on illithid powers is very useful for one of the best illithid power users in the game. Her unique ability is also incredibly useful for this build, so she's just one of the strongest characters to build this with, in addition to being a very flavorful choice. If you're building this as a custom character, and this makes an excellent main character, so definitely a great option, then Drow or Half-Drow are still excellent choices. The extra casts of Darkness are extremely useful, and Halfling's ability to reroll ones is phenomenal for a character that's rolling as many dice as this character is, especially if you're going to have this be your party face, then you're going to roll a lot of d20s, and rerolling those ones takes away one of the few ways that you can fail when you're playing this character. Other great options include Dwergar for the out-of-combat invisibility, always extremely powerful, and Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf's bonus movement speed are great for any melee build, so that's what I'd choose from an optimization perspective, though since we get all of the proficiencies and stuff that we need, you can pick any race and it will be very strong with this character regardless. Now, as we're building this character, something that I should mention is that this is an extremely flexible character. Almost any level split between these two classes will end up with a very powerful character, so whatever you want to emphasize most for your Lockadin or Warden or Padlock or Pallock, however you prefer to say it, feel free to have a long debate in the comments about that. Whatever you want to emphasize for this character is going to end up with a very powerful character, but we're going to build it in the way that yields the strongest overall. Something else that's worth mentioning is we want to take Paladin at first level for this build, because that gets us heavy armor proficiency. If you take Paladin later in the build, you don't get heavy armor, and there are heavy armors that we want to use. But if you're building this character from level 1, you may be better off just playing a straight-up Hexblade Warlock for the first 5 levels, and then respecking to this level split at level 6 to gain heavy armor proficiency. You won't get good suits of heavy armor until around level 6 anyways, so that just lets you get higher level Warlock abilities a little faster. For this version of the build, though, we're taking Paladin at level 1, and that gets us heavy armor and all the martial weapon proficiencies, and for our Paladin subclass, we're taking the new Oath of the Crown. This is one of the major buffs that this build has received in patch 8, is the existence of Oath of the Crown, which gets us the incredibly powerful Righteous Clarity ability. This is a bonus action and a channel oath charge, so you can use it once per short rest, that lasts for 10 turns and adds your proficiency bonus, so at early levels +2, scaling to +4 by endgame, to all of your attack rolls. Obviously, we're making a ridiculous number of attack rolls, so hitting our attacks is the thing that we want most in the entire game, because that's where all of our damage comes from. This gives us a massive boost to the effectiveness of our character, means that we will very rarely miss important attacks, so our incredible damage output will be even more reliable. Huge buff and great ability that we get just from one level of Oath of the Crown Paladin. For our ability score selection, we're going to take 8 strength, because this character is planning to use its charisma for everything. Weapon attacks, ranged attacks, spellcasting, dialogue, of course. Everything will key off of our charisma, so all we care about is getting that as high as possible. We, therefore, want to take 17 charisma, we'll take 10 wisdom, and then we'll pick up 14 constitution and 16 dexterity. If you're really nervous about 14 Constitution, it won't hurt your character that much to take 14 Dex and 16 Con, but one of the very few challenges for this character is that we don't get easy access to the Alert feat, usually incredibly important for honor mode runs, so we want to boost our initiative as much as possible using high dexterity and initiative gear to make certain that we go before enemies and can kill them before they act or control them before they get to do bad things back to us. So we're taking super high dexterity and we're taking the maximum charisma. You'll notice the 17 charisma here. This is probably the highest priority character for getting Ethel's hair. So if you're getting that in your honor mode run, then that will allow you to reach 20 charisma with only a single feat. There's other events in the game that let you increase your charisma, and this character uses charisma so incredibly well that you are going to want to stack those events on this character as much as possible. Any stat increases that you can get are incredible. You don't need Ethel's hair to make this build work, but if you have it, it should go to this character. For our skill selection, as a charisma-based character, this character makes an ideal party face. We're going to max out our charisma as quickly as possible, so we're going to make sure to get persuasion and proficiency in any of the other dialogue skills that you want. The guild artisan background, if you're taking this as a custom character, is very useful as well, getting you persuasion and insight, and putting the extra point into insight, which paladins get access to, is pretty useful also, because this skill, does come up in a lot of dialogue checks, but the most important thing is making sure that we have persuasion. Perception proficiency, which Minthara gets from race, is also pretty useful, but mostly just build face skills like persuasion, insight, and the other dialogue skills. That's the only things we have to do at level 1, so let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're immediately leaving Paladin, and we're going to start taking Warlock levels. This gets us access to all of the most important things that make this character work, because we're taking Hexblade Warlock. Obviously, at this point, you know just how good the first level of Hexblade Warlock is. It gives you more abilities at first level than a lot of classes get over the entirety of their 12 levels. But of course, it also gives you the most important thing, Bind Hexed Weapon, which allows this character to attack with melee weapons using its charisma. That means we tie both our spellcasting and melee damage to our charisma, making this character fully single attribute dependent. We also get to take 2 cantrips, and for our cantrip selection, we're going to take Eldritch Blast, of course critical for any Warlock build, and Booming Blade, another one of the incredible buffs that this character has received in patch 8, because this just massively increases your damage effectively for free. Even at low levels, this is a huge damage increase. You can hit an enemy with it and then move away or shove them or something, so that enemies will take the extra d8 of thunder damage, but then as you level it up, it will do even more damage output. And of course, Eldritch Blast gives us a great ranged attack to go with our incredible melee damage, and our later game, incredible spellcasting as well. Speaking of spellcasting, we also get to take some spells here, and of course, as a Hexblade Warlock, we get access to another spell that is incredibly powerful for this build, Shield. The armor class of this build is now going to be very, very difficult for enemies to hit. Since we're fighting in darkness, a lot of enemies will be making attacks, if they ever attack us, with disadvantage. And then if they do manage to land a hit, we can use a reaction to shield it. So this gives us a tremendous defensive boost, especially in the early game, but it remains relevant throughout the entirety of the game to prevent just bad things from happening to your character. If something starts to go wrong, Shield will usually fix it. For our second spell, we're going to take Hex. This just increases our damage output both at range and in melee enormously. Between Hex and Hexblade's Curse, we have 2 bonus actions that give us a significant boost to our damage output. And in longer fights, we can use both of them on the same enemy in order to make every shot with an Eldritch Blast, which gets multiple beams, or every attack do just that much more damage. So Hexblade powers everything on a single attribute and gives us a tremendous amount of additional power level on every aspect of the character. Character level 3, we're taking our second Warlock level, which gets us another spell. They have fixed the bug where Hexblade Warlocks were getting 2 spells at level 2, so we only get 1 additional spell here. But the spell that we're going to take is Armor of Agathis. This, of course, increases our defensive capabilities even more, and when enemies do manage to land a hit, which should be very rare, they take some damage in return. Mostly, though, this lets us convert a short rest resource, our Warlock spell slots, into a long rest benefit, because the hit points last until they're destroyed. We also get 2 Eldritch Invocations, and like every Warlock before us, we're going to take Agonizing Blast, making us an incredibly potent threat at range with our Eldritch Blasts, and Devil's Sight, because that lets us abuse Darkness. Darkness in Baldur's Gate 3 is an incredibly powerful mechanic, completely preventing enemy ranged attacks, although not thrown weapons, but ranged attacks, giving enemies disadvantage and giving us advantage on all of our attacks. So if we're standing in darkness with Devil's Sight, we have just a huge benefit to, again, every single thing that our party is trying to do. At character level 4, we're going to take our third Warlock level, getting second level spells, and our Pact boon choice. So, for our second level spells, there's 2 spells that we have to take at this level, so we're going to replace one of our level 1 spells. The first spell that we're taking is, of course, Darkness. The Warlock can see through magical darkness. This is one of the most powerful strategies in the game, and one that this character uses better than pretty much any other character, because we can fight at range with our Eldritch Blast, and if enemies come into melee, they explode thanks to our super high burst damage. So Darkness is very, very valuable to us. And obviously a must-have for this character. And then the second one we're going to replace one of our level 1 spells for. We're going to replace Armor of Agathis in this case, because we're taking another day-long buff. So we will still use Hex if we want a more offensively focused concentration than Darkness. Armor of Agathis we're less likely to use at this point, since we are always going to be spending one of our first spell slots in the day on casting Shadowblade. This is another one of the ways in which this character was massively buffed in Patch 8. Shadowblade gives us a super high damage weapon for the early game. 2d8 psychic damage is really, really strong. We get advantage whenever the enemy is in dim light as well, which means a lot of critical hits. And as a paladin, we're going to benefit a ton from getting critical hits. And we can upcast this with our higher level spell slots to make it do more damage. With a 3rd or 4th level spell slot, it will do 3d8 psychic damage, and with a 5th or 6th level spell slot, it'll do 4d8 psychic damage. Well, Warlocks upgrade their spell slots for free, so Shadowblade is always going to be max level for this character and do a tremendous amount of damage. We can also combo it with items for even more damage output. For our Pact boon, of course, as a Hexblade Warlock, we're pretty much forced to take Pact of the Blade. Otherwise, we don't get extra attack when we hit Warlock level 5, which we want, of course, on this character. So Pact of the Blade is the only real option here. At character level 5, we're continuing to level in Warlock, and we get an additional cantrip and our first feat. For our cantrip, there's actually a lot of options that we can take for this character. Bone Chill is a great combat option. If you're solo and don't have it otherwise, you should take Minor Illusion, because every party can use this, especially solo parties, to group enemies for your AoE effects and stuff like that. Minor Illusion is critically important. Typically, if you're playing in a party, you'll have this on another character by now, so we won't need to take it. Friend's also very good for your as for this character being your party face, and Blade Ward can give you some defensive capabilities if you get into an emergency. So our cantrips are actually fairly hotly contested. The most powerful one from a combat perspective is Bone Chill, because the ability to stop enemies from healing and give undead targets disadvantage is relevant throughout the game, extremely useful in Act 2, so I will recommend taking Bone Chill for the highest combat power, but any of these three other options are also great picks for your cantrip selection as well. For our spell selection, we have a number of choices that we can take here, all of which are pretty interesting. We could go back and pick up Armor of Agathis again, though again, our day-long buffs are going to be a little contested until we're higher level at least, so this we will usually just want to use that spell slot on Shadowblade, unless you're short resting and long resting a lot on in your party. A solo character, again, may want Armor of Agathis, because the extra hit points can prevent emergencies from occurring. Other great options include Cloud of Daggers or Misty Step. Cloud of Daggers, very consistent combat spell. Misty Step, good for avoiding emergencies, but I'm going to recommend just taking Hold Person here. This can get you automatic critical hits, incredibly powerful for this character. We have high charisma, so a great single target control spell can just win some fights, and we're going to want this for certain item combinations in the late game. Finally, for our feat, we have a number of other options as well for what feat we take. We could just take an ASI to boost our charisma as much as possible, or we could pick up Savage Attacker now. We're going to want Savage Attacker because we will roll a ridiculous number of dice, and we're making a lot of melee weapon attacks, so this will be a pretty significant increase to our average damage output. However, at this level, we're not rolling that many dice yet, so while Savage Attacker is a nice damage boost still, I'm going to recommend for our level 4 feat, we just take an ASI and boost our Charisma. Since this character uses Charisma for absolutely everything, you can never go wrong with doing this. It gives you accuracy, save DC, damage, and so on, so when you have a stat that good, just take more of it. At level 6... we're taking our 5th level of Warlock, which as a Pact of the Blade Warlock gets us extra attack, so now we can attack twice. This next level will let us use 2 smites. It also doubles our damage output just on turns where we're attacking by default, so it's a ridiculous amount of bonus damage. We also get access to 3rd level Warlock spells and have upgraded our Shadow Blade to level 3, so our damage output has gone up just tremendously, and our utility has also gone up enormously. We get some of the biggest power spikes in the game at this level because we get to take Counterspell, the best defensive reaction in the game. Now we always have great reactions to use between Counterspell and Shield. And we're going to also replace a spell again, in this case Hex, because we have a lot of other things we want to spend our concentration on between Hold Person and Darkness, and the other spell that we are going to replace Hex with, Hunger of Hadar. Hold Person's great against single targets. Darkness is great if you are going for a more defensive strategy. Hunger of Hadar just locks down whole groups of enemies. This, in combination with Spike Growth, is encounter winning, and it's just an encounter winning spell anyways. One of the great reasons to be a Warlock is access to this incredible spell, so of course we're going to take it. For our Eldritch Invocation at this level, we are going to pick up Repelling Blast. Now that we have Hunger of Hadar, a very common play pattern for us is going to be putting enemies in Hunger of Hadar. They slowly and tortuously make their way out of it, and then we push them right back into it. And you can win a lot of fights that way as well. So Repelling Blast, extremely powerful for this character, gives you a lot of control over the battlefield at range, in melee, and just over our enemies in general. So this character continues to add layers and layers of strategic options, as well as just pure raw power. Having received our enormous power spike at Warlock level 5, for our 7th level, we're going to take our 2nd level of Paladin. This gets us a ton of additional power level. So firstly, of course, we get access to smites. As a Warlock, we have 3rd level spell slots that come back on a short rest. We can now spend those on smites for a massive amount of burst damage. We have 2 spell slots per short rest, so if we really want an enemy dead, we can double smite them in a single turn for an incredible amount of damage output. In addition to that, we also get 2 1st level Paladin spell slots. These are long rest spells, but the fact that they're 1st level is actually pretty nice for us, because a very common spell that we're going to cast is Shield. And we don't want to waste a valuable Warlock spell slot, a level 3 slot, on casting the shield spell. But now we've got these lower value Paladin spell slots, we can spend those instead. We also get a fighting style, and we're going to go ahead and take defense. Defense fighting style just means this character is even harder to kill. If you really want to go all in on damage, you can take dueling, because you can use a shield alongside your Shadowblade. Shadowblade's a one-handed weapon, so there's no point in taking great weapon fighting. But defense is just always a super solid pick and great for this character. Makes you even harder to kill on this already extremely hard to kill class. Then, of course, we get our Paladin spells as well, which give us even more great options. We're always taking Command. This is the best control spell in the game, and one of the very best spells in the game. Because we're a Paladin, it casts using our Charisma, which, of course, is very, very high. So we can now control enemies very easily, and, of course, it will combo with the Arcane Acuity and Band of the Mystic Scoundrel stuff that this character can do later on as well. We also get Bless to make ourselves even more accurate. Again, you can spend a Paladin level 1 spell slot on casting Bless if there's an enemy that you are having trouble hitting. Past that, you probably are not using your Paladin spellcasts that frequently, though it is pretty useful to take Thunderous Smite. Less useful than for most Paladins, but you can use this and a normal Paladin Smite in the same turn. So if you want to spend a level 1 and a level 3 Warlock spell slot for a huge amount of burst damage. This is less useful than for other Paladins, though, because we have Booming Blade, and you can't do... because of the way the game triggers all these abilities, you can't do Booming Blade and Thunderous Smite and a Paladin Smite all in the same turn. It won't let you use the reactions menu for that. But this still gives you an option if you've already used your Booming Blade for the turn for even more burst damage. And then you can just take some situational spells, things like Protection from Evil and Good, Shield of Faith is a day-long concentration spell. You'll have other stuff to concentrate on, but maybe it comes up occasionally. Maybe Cure Wounds comes up. At this point, we're kind of reaching for spells, so just take whatever you think sounds fun, because these spell slots are always going to be used for shields or smites anyways. Now, as we hit level 8, it is worth mentioning at this point that if you're playing on Tactician mode, then the build is going to be a little different than what we're going to show here. I'll do a quick rundown for Tactician difficulty and lower of the final Lockadin build right at the end of the video. But basically, you're going to take more Paladin levels because extra attack from Paladin and Warlock stacks on lower difficulty settings, but not on Honor mode. So on Honor mode, we're just going to take higher levels in Warlock to get higher level spell slots. With level 6 Warlock, we get Accursed Spectre, which of course is a very powerful tool. This again lets us use our reaction very profitably. Enemies will be afflicted with Hexblade's Curse a lot because we can cast it, or we can get it on enemies by hitting them. There's a 20% chance every time we hit an enemy, which we're going to be doing a lot. So this will give us a lot of summons. This is especially useful for a solo character because it can really distract enemies and prevent them from focusing damage on this character if you're solo, but very useful for a party as well. For our spell selection at this level, we can go back and pick up Armor of Agathis. We can pick up Misty Step for an emergency button. We can take Hypnotic Pattern for AoE control. Any of those are great options. I'm going to suggest taking Misty Step just because this character can get in trouble if you run into, if you get into a truly horrible situation, you don't have a ton of mobility options. This gives you a panic button, and these spell slots are going to be used for your generically powerful spells and smites anyways. So having situational but very useful spells like Misty Step can be very helpful to a Warlock character in general. We don't need to replace a spell, though, because our spell list is now perfect, so let's go straight on to level 9. Character level 9, we're taking our 7th Warlock level, getting us 4th level Warlock spell slots. That maxes out our smite damage, so whenever we smite, we're doing enormous amount of damage, and also gets us 4th level Warlock spells. Now, the Warlock spells at 4th level are actually not that exciting, but there's one that the Hexblade gets that no other Warlocks get that's actually kind of fun, and that's Phantasmal Killer. This is another concentration spell, but normally the problem with this spell is that it takes a 4th level spell slot. It's not a bad spell, it's just very expensive, but since Warlock spells are always auto-upgraded, this can be a pretty solid option. It can really lock down a single enemy, and because it's psychic damage, it synergizes with the Resonant Stone to deal double damage. And so can be a pretty powerful option. I suggest this more because it's really neat that this spell that doesn't get used that often is really nice for this character. There's a lot of other great options as well, which I've talked about extensively already. Of course, greater invisibility to abuse stealth stuff is always an option also, but Phantasmal Killer is powerful and fun, and no other character gets to use it, so I'm going to suggest taking it here. For our Eldritch Invocation, we're going to go ahead and pick up Dreadful Word. This gives us another powerful AoE control spell in the form of Confusion. This is another concentration spell, but this works even when your enemies and allies are mixed up together because it only hits enemies, so you can cast it even if the battlefield is very confused, then Confusion will still do stuff. But I hear you asking, surely there's a way that this character can go from some of the highest damage in the game to the even highest damage in the game. And of course there is when we take Warlock level 8 and get our second feat. This gets us the Savage Attacker feat, which gives us effectively advantage on all damage dice that we roll. This character rolls a ridiculous number of dice. Our basic weapon rolls, at this level, 3d8 damage, so that's 3 different dice. And then next level is going to roll 4 d8s. So Savage Attacker's an enormous increase to the average damage of our base weapon. We're also going to re-roll the damage dice from Booming Blade attacks, so that's even more damage, and we're doing that every single turn, because of course at these levels, Booming Blade has upgraded and is now doing a d8 of initial damage, and then next level it'll do 2d8 more initial damage. Then we're adding up to 5d8 smite damage, so we can reroll all of that, plus any other damage dice that we have from bonuses from our allies, from our items, and so on. So this feat is going to add 10 or 20 average damage per swing to our attacks, making this character both incredibly consistent because it removes sort of the low rolls on damage, and also just boosting our average damage into the stratosphere. It doesn't increase our maximum damage, but our maximum damage is so high already that making sure that we hit the highest average damage is by far the most important thing. So we get Savage Attacker now that we're just rolling just fistfuls of dice every single attack. That increases our damage output tremendously. We also get another spell slot, and at this point you have a good sense of what we might want for spells. But we're going to go back and pick up Hypnotic Pattern. It gives us another great control option for certain encounters, and now we have control options for if we want to stop a bunch of enemies. If we want to lock enemies in place and damage them, we've got Hunger of Hadar. If enemies are mixed up with our allies, we have Confusion. And if there's a single powerful enemy or a few humanoid enemies, we have Hold Person. So we have options for basically every scenario to lock down enemies. This is also an illusion spell, so of course it works with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel as well. At character level 11, we are going to take our 9th level of Warlock and get 5th level Warlock spell slots. This gives us a bunch of different things. So firstly, we hit character level 11, so our cantrips upgrade again. That means 3 Eldritch Blast beams, all of which are adding our charisma and pushing enemies. And it means also that our Booming Blades are doing 2d8 initial damage and 3d8 subsequent damage, so our damage output has been increased tremendously yet again. But even more importantly, when we get 5th level spell slots, our Shadow Blade is now cast with a 5th level spell slot, meaning it does 4d8 base damage. That's a massive increase to our damage output. So getting 5th level Warlock spell slots just increases our overall damage output enormously. We also get 5th level Warlock spells, which for this character are really, really strong. There's 3 different great options that we can pick up for our 5th level Warlock spells, all of which are very, very good. We can take Banishing Smite for the maximum possible damage. It does take our bonus action and concentration, but it lets us add 5d10 force damage for even more burst damage. We can take Hold Monster, which gives us yet another powerful control spell, and we can replace Hold Person with this if we don't think we want to control, a lot of people at once, because Hold Person will, if cast with a 5th level slot, it's going to hit 4 targets, so you can use it on a lot of humanoids all at once. Hold Monster will only work on 1 target, but it works on anything that's not undead, so, since we have other AoE options, Hold Monster is a great choice as well, and again, automatic critical is super powerful. Cone of Cold is also a pretty big burst damage AoE spell, and one thing that this character doesn't have, we've got, control, damage over time, single target burst, single target control. We don't have AoE burst, so Cone of Cold can give us the one thing that this character is missing. That said, I think that you're better off just relying on Illithid powers and scrolls for AoE burst damage rather than selecting Cone of Cold for this character, because it sort of requires you to get enemies wet and stuff to maximize it. So for our spell selection here, we're going to take Banishing Smite. For our Eldritch Invocation, we're going to take Minions of Chaos, giving us a day-long summon. That's another way that we can increase our party's power level throughout the entire day if we want to, and give us more stuff on the battlefield. And then we're going to replace a spell here. At this point, what spell you replace is going to depend a little bit on what you're actually finding that you use, depending on on how you've been playing up to this point. You may have different spells that you've used the most often, or different things that are covered by your party. My suggestion is just get an item that gives you Misty Step, and then we can replace Misty Step, because at this point our spell slots are such a valuable resource. We don't want to use them on Misty Step, so we're going to replace Misty Step with Hold Monster in order to give ourselves the best possible control options, no matter what enemies we're facing. Then, at character level 12, we get to take our last level, and now that we've gotten our 5th level Warlock slots, we have a choice between taking 3rd level Paladin or 10th level of Warlock. But level 3 Paladin for Oath of the Crown Paladin doesn't give us that much that we're interested in. It's some support abilities, which are not bad, but 10th level Warlock gets us more spells, more spell selection, which increases the versatility of the character enormously, and also as a Hexblade gets us Armor of Hexes, which is another pretty powerful defensive ability. We do have other reactions that we can use defensively, but we're going to be Hexblades cursing a lot of enemies, and usually the most dangerous enemy in an encounter, so a 50% chance of just stopping an attack is still pretty relevant. You don't want to count on this for honor mode, especially for solo honor mode, but it's still a nice defensive bonus to have if you don't plan to do anything else in a turn with your reaction. So Armor of Hexes is a really nice ability, and then also we get an extra spell known, which lets us broaden the capabilities of the character significantly. At this point, you should have a pretty good idea of what you're missing for this character. There's a lot of different options that we can take, which can emphasize different things. You can take Greater Invisibility as a panic button, and for Stealth Cheese, you can take Misty Step again as a panic button. You can take Armor of Agathis for more defense and greater day-long buffing capabilities, but with only 2 Warlock spell slots, that is a little bit less efficient than if you were a monoclass Warlock. Or we can just take Cone of Cold or Banishment. Banishment is great against any enemy with weak charisma saves. I'm going to recommend taking Cone of Cold because it does come up sometimes, but by this point in the game, you should have a great sense of what you need. We also get another cantrip, and there's still 4 cantrips that we want. Blade Ward, of course, can be useful, again, if we're surrounded by enemies. Friends, still great even in the late game to make sure we're passing all of our dialogue checks. Mage Hand can be a useful little buddy to throw bombs and potions. And Minor Illusion, still extremely helpful if we don't have it, to group up enemies or split them off from their allies. But given all of those great options, of course, we're much more interested in annoying people in the YouTube comments, so we're going to take True Strike instead. Alright, my friends, that is the Lockadin. This is one of the most powerful characters in Baldur's Gate 3, so I hope it helps you with your honor mode runs. I'll quickly run down the differences if you're playing on Tactician or lower as well, but for your honor mode build, this is it. Of course, we can make it more powerful with proper item selection, so we're going to get to that in just a second. For Tactician mode or lower, the variance is really very simple. Starting at level 8, instead of taking more Warlock levels, we're going to take more Paladin levels, because when we hit Paladin level 5 and Warlock level 5, we're still taking Savage Attacker as our second feat. When we take Paladin level 5 and Warlock level 5, we get extra attack from Paladin, and we get extra attack from Warlock with Pact of the Blade, and on Tactician mode or lower, these 2 sources of extra attack stack, giving us 3 attacks per round. As a Crown Paladin, we also get some other nice bonuses as we level up, including access to Warding Bond and Spiritual Weapon here, but having gotten to level 10 with 5 levels of Paladin, we're going to go back and take more Warlock levels, because of course we still want to get 4th level Warlock spell slots to max out our smite damage. So we're basically going to make the same selection of spells and everything that we would for Honor Mode, but instead stop at Warlock 7 and Paladin 5 in order to give ourselves the 3rd attack. Although this does sacrifice the extra damage die from Shadowblade, we're only going to get 3d8 instead of 4d8. It's just attacking 3 times in a turn is better than anything else you can do. So on Tactician mode or lower, you'll make all the same decisions, but with 3 more Paladin levels in order to get a 3rd attack. So that will be helpful if you're playing on lower difficulties. 4 items for this character. Of course, our first and most important item is not in fact an item, but is actually a spell, Shadowblade. We're going to cast this at the beginning of every day in order to give ourselves the best possible weapon. You can see it does 4d8 plus 3 psychic damage, but then when we use Bind Hexed Weapon, it will deal damage both based on our charisma in order to max out our weapon damage. Once we've boosted our charisma a bit, this will be an absurd amount of damage per attack, and of course we're going to increase it even further with our other items, so make sure that you do those 2 things at the start of every adventuring day. For other items for this character, there are a tremendous amount of incredibly powerful items that this character can make basically the best use of possible. One thing to keep in mind when you're building this character, especially as part of a party, is that this character both needs items more and makes better use of them than pretty much any other build in the game. So if there's ever a conflict between this party member and another party member as to who should get an important item, it should almost always go on this character because they will make better use of it than just about any other character. All right, let's start with specifics and especially broken ones. So firstly, we've got a Shadowblade. Shadowblade does psychic damage. It does so based on our charisma, and we do tons and tons of damage with it. But what if we did twice as much damage without even spending an item slot? The Resonant Stone breaks Shadowblade in half. Already a really nice weapon, but the Resonant Stone just sits in your inventory and gives every creature within its radius, which is fairly large, vulnerability to psychic damage. That just straight up doubles the damage of our weapon attacks and quadruples it on a critical hit. So we're going to be doing absurd amounts of damage when we have the Resonant Stone in our inventory using Shadowblade. This is another one of the incredibly broken things that this character got in patch 8, and it now just does some of the absolute highest damage in the game. It does mean that you have disadvantage on mental saving throws, so you're going to want to try to find ways to avoid getting hit by those or pass them automatically. But the downside is extremely worth it because the upside is killing everything in a single hit. Another incredibly broken combination that this character gets access to is the Gloves of Battle Mage's Power, which have been newly fixed to actually work. Prior to patch 8, this item did nothing, and again, massive buff to the character that it now functions correctly. Combined with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel. The Gloves of Battle Mage's Power give you, whenever you hit a target with a spell or cantrip that uses a weapon, well, we have as our weapon a spell that is a weapon. So every single attack, we're going to gain 2 stacks of Arcane Acuity with the Gloves of Battle Mage's Power. And we also have other options to use Booming Blade and stuff. On lower difficulties, I believe this gives you 4 stacks if you Booming Blade with Shadowblade. I haven't actually tested that on Tactician mode, so somebody who plays on Tactician, please let me know in the comments. But either way, you're building massive stacks of Arcane Acuity. This means that your spells will never miss, because you gain bonuses to your attack rolls and spell save DC per stack. And then you can use your bonus action with the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel to cast a bonus action control spell, as long as it's illusion or enchantment. Well, all of our spells that we've taken are illusion or enchantment spells, so bonus action Hold Monster, bonus action Hypnotic Pattern, bonus action Command from our Paladin levels, bonus action Hold Person, all of these are possible, and enemies will not be able to resist their effects because we have such high stacks of Arcane Acuity. Those are kind of the broken combos that we really want to make use of to make this character incredibly strong, but there's also some other specific items that we do very, very well with. This character desperately needs initiative bonuses. It's the one thing that it doesn't get on its own. So an item like the Hellrider Longbow that basically doesn't use an item slot for us because we don't use our bow otherwise, gives us the passive +3 to initiative. Combined with our 16 dexterity, maybe another initiative item somewhere in your setup, you'll be winning initiative pretty reliably. Of course, we have good defensive stats, so we can usually survive if we lose initiative, but always better to win it, so Hellrider Longbow should almost always go to this character. On a similar note, you can also use the Gloves of Dexterity if you want and don't want to abuse Arcane Acuity. The Gloves of Dexterity make a great alternative item, which can give you higher armor class if you're going for the more offensive setup with our armor as well, and of course increases your AC and increases your initiative as well. The Gloves of Belligerent Skies also let you use Reverberation for this character. We're doing a lot of thunder damage with Booming Blades and radiant damage with Smites, so that's another option if you want to abuse Reverberation, but for your glove slot, the Battle Mage's Power Gloves are going to be the best in slot, typically. For our weapon, of course, we're using the Shadow Blade, though you can use Shar's Spear of Evening as well for this character. It's lower damage, but is another option, but for the most part, you don't need to pick a weapon, so other characters can use whatever weapons you have for your party. And then for our armor and helmet slots, we have a choice between a more offensive setup and a more defensive setup. The more offensive setup is to take the Potent Robe. Obviously, this does not give us high armor class, but we have pretty good ways of boosting our defensive stats in general, and we're always going to be in darkness and so on, so it's not as bad to have low AC on this character. What it does do is give our cantrips extra damage equal to our charisma modifier. That's going to be up to +7, depending on what story events we've used to increase our charisma. And what's a cantrip? Booming Blade's a cantrip, so we can add that to our weapon attacks as well as to each beam of Eldritch Blast, which already gets it from Agonizing Blast, so Potent Robe gives us a massive amount of burst damage. The Birthright Hat can increase our charisma as well, and since we are using Arcane Acuity with the glove slot, we can use the Birthright Hat to boost our charisma even further, or use other story events or items that increase our charisma. The more charisma you have on this character, obviously, the stronger it is. For the more defensive option, the Armor of Persistence is, of course, best in slot for defensive capabilities, giving us huge AC and resistance to all damage, because of Blade Ward and better saving throws, which this character does want. And then you can use the Helm of Baldurin to heal, prevent critical hits, prevent stuns, increase your AC. So this character is very, very hard to kill with this item setup. Another great option is the Fistbreaker Helm. Initiative and save DC are always super useful for this character. For our offhand item slot, we again have a choice between a more offensive and a more defensive setup. For the more defensive setup, of course, we have a one-handed weapon in the form of Shadow Blade, so we can use a shield like Viconia's Walking Fortress to make ourselves even harder to kill. For a solo character, this setup is basically unkillable, so this is what I would go with for a solo character, because you can prevent most of the ways that you can lose a solo run with all of these items. But for a more offensive item, well, Shadowblade is a short sword, so it's a light weapon. We can use a second weapon in our offhand. We won't attack with it, but there's a lot that give us great passive benefits, like the Knife of the Undermountain King, which increases our chance to critical hit, or the Bloodlust Dagger, things like that. So a second weapon can also increase our damage output enormously. For our second ring, the Ring of Arcane Synergy gives us, again, a tremendous boost to our damage. So this weapon gives us Arcane Synergy for 2 turns whenever we deal damage with a cantrip. That does, again, include Booming Blade. So that will increase our damage output with our weapons by our spellcasting modifier, again by our charisma. So we can stack our charisma up to 3 times per weapon attack with the Ring of Arcane Synergy and the Potent Robe, as long as we're constantly triggering Arcane Synergy with the Potent Robe, and that can be up to plus 21 damage per swing with all of our charisma, so we get even higher boosts to our damage output. Another solid option is anything that increases our critical hit chance or gives us automatic criticals, like the Killer's Sweetheart. These, of course, critical hits are incredibly strong for a Paladin, because you get a critical smite, it doubles all the smite damage, doubles all the already doubled Shadow Blade damage, and so on. So Killer's Sweetheart, a great option as well. And then finally, you can round this out with a defensive item or one that gives you some panic buttons. Something like the Disintegrating Nightwalkers gives you Misty Step and prevents you from falling over. You'll always be concentrating, so the Boots of Striding completely prevent you from being knocked prone or moved, and again, removes another way that this character can be interacted with at all by enemies. Things like the Amulet of Misty Step also give you great options as well. For our endgame setup for this character, the most powerful option is, in my opinion, to go with the defensive setup, especially if you're solo. But if you just want the maximum possible damage, the Potent Robe and the additional Charisma will do that. So either of those are great options. This character does plenty of damage, though, already. So I prefer the Armor of Persistence and Helm of Baldurin, just because not dying means that you will pretty much auto-win, since this character is so strong as long as it's on the battlefield. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at one of the strongest builds in Baldur's Gate 3 post-patch 8, and I hope that it will help you in your Honor Mode runs. Of course, if you have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. It helps me out with the algorithm, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.